Ma'am, I need you to step off this property.
This is my house.
Great. Let's move over to the sidewalk. We'll sort it out there.
I live here. I just came home from court.
Do you have any ID that shows that?
Right here. Court badge, driver's license inside. Everything matches this address.
Still need you to step away from the door.
The porch light is still warming up when the squad car stops at the curb. Headlights slice across a neatly trimmed lawn. On the front steps, a black woman in a t-shirt, yoga pants, and house slippers stands with a takeout bag in one hand and her phone in the other. She's just pulled into her driveway after a long day in court. She's thinking about reheating dinner, not defending herself. But the officer walking up the path already decided she doesn't belong here. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step off the property," he says, hand resting on his holster. "This is a private residence." She looks at him, stunned. "This is my private residence," she replies, holding up her keys. "I live here." He doesn't look at the keys. He doesn't look at the garage door slowly closing behind her car. He looks at her skin, at her clothes, at the fact that she's standing on this particular porch in this particular neighborhood. And then he repeats himself. "Step off the property, now." The woman takes a slow breath. She has spent her entire adult life inside courtrooms. She knows what unlawful orders sound like, because she gives the lawful ones for a living. She is a judge. And this is the night a racist cop orders a black judge off her own property. A night that will end in bodycam footage, public outrage, and a $5.1 million case the city never planned to fight, and could never afford to lose. To understand how surreal this moment really is, you have to know who she is when the robe comes off. We'll call her Judge Renee. Renee grew up in a part of town where people cracked jokes about making it to the suburbs one day, like it was a fantasy. She didn't laugh. She studied. She stayed late in the library. She watched courtroom dramas on TV and thought, why is no one up there who looks like us? She went to law school. She clerked. She worked late nights in public defense, then prosecution. Eventually, she took an oath. In a packed courtroom, with her hand raised and a Bible under her palm, she swore to uphold the Constitution. The same Constitution that says your home is your castle. The same one that supposedly protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures. On the bench, attorneys stand when she walks in. They call her Your Honor. Off the bench, she's still a black woman in America. And that means, in the eyes of some people, she's guilty of something before she ever speaks. Years of work, promotions, late-night hearings, and early morning arraignments led her to the house she's standing in front of tonight. A 2-story place in a quiet, mostly white neighborhood. It has a mortgage, a mailbox with her last name on it, and a yard she pays a landscaper to mow because she spends more time reading case files than pulling weeds. To her, it's just home. To someone watching from a window across the street, it's suspicious activity. It starts with a call to police dispatch. "There's a black woman on my neighbor's porch," a voice says. "I don't recognize her. She pulled up, got out of her car, and now she's just standing there." The dispatcher asks if the caller saw a break-in. "No, but this is a nice neighborhood," the caller replies. "Can you just send someone to check it out?" The description is vague, but familiar. Black, female, alone. On a porch someone thinks she doesn't deserve. The dispatcher codes it. Suspicious person, possible trespass. A patrol car picks it up. If you're already feeling your jaw clench, this is exactly the kind of everyday power abuse we break down on this channel. If you want more people to see what really happens when race and policing collide in places like this, hit like and tell us what city you're watching from. It genuinely helps push stories like this into more people's feeds. Now back to that driveway. Officer Daniels pulls up without sirens. He sees the car in the driveway. She sees the woman on the steps. He sees a takeout bag, keys, a phone. He doesn't see homeowner. He sees call subject. He walks up the path like he owns it. "Ma'am, I'm responding to a report of trespassing," he announces. "I'm going to need you to step off this property while we sort this out." Renee turns toward him fully now. "Officer, I live here," she says calmly. "This is my house. What seems to be the problem?" "Step off the property," he repeats, speaking over her. "We can talk on the sidewalk." She's tired. She's had a full day of listening to people argue about statutes and jurisdiction. She's signed warrants, denied others, tried to thread the impossible needle between justice and the system's bad habits. She knows exactly how far his authority goes. And she knows this isn't it. "No," she says, still calm but firmer. "I am on my own property. I am not trespassing. If there's a neighbor who doesn't recognize me, they can look at my mailbox." Daniel's jaw tightens. "Are you refusing a lawful order?" he asks. "What law?" she shoots back. "You have no reasonable suspicion of a crime, and no right to order a homeowner off her own porch." There's a pause. In a different world, this is where he backs up, where he looks at the house number, checks his computer, radios dispatch, and says, "It's a misunderstanding. Cancel." In this world, his ego gets there first. "Let me see ID," he demands, stepping closer. Renee doesn't move. "Happy to show it," she says. "You can stand on the sidewalk while I go inside and get my wallet." Daniel shakes his head. "You're not going anywhere. You step inside that door, I consider that fleeing. Present ID now, or you'll be detained." She stares at him. "I don't typically carry government ID in my sweatpants," she says dryly. "But since you're so invested in who I am, I'll tell you. I'm a sitting judge in this county, and I am telling you, you are not going to order me off my own property." He laughs, not because it's funny, because he doesn't believe her. "Right," he says, "and I'm the president. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The Bodycam captures what happens next. He reaches for her wrist. She steps back, instinctively. "Don't touch me," she warns. "You are violating my rights." He grabs her anyway. The takeout bag drops. Boxes of food spill across the porch. "Stop resisting," he barks, even though the video shows her going rigid, not fighting. A neighbor opens a door. Another lifts a phone. Renee is pressed against the side of her own house. "This is unlawful," she says, voice shaking with anger now. "I live here. You will regret this." "I'll take my chances," Daniels mutters, snapping cuffs around the wrists of a woman who has signed more arrest warrants than he's executed. What he doesn't realize yet is that he just turned a suspicious person call into a constitutional law exam, and he's failing it on camera. At the station, they search her, find a courthouse keycard, a judicial ID folded in her pocket. Suddenly, faces change. A sergeant pulls Daniels aside. "You didn't verify the address?" "She was refusing orders," he insists. "She's on the property tax rolls," the sergeant says, voice low. "Name on the deed, been living there for years. And she's a judge." Silence. The report on the screen, possible trespasser, refused orders, starts to look less like good policing and more like what it is. Racially biased harassment of a homeowner. Of a black woman who knows the law better than anyone in that room. Renee is released, no charges. Someone mumbles something that is not an apology. Miscommunication. "Just doing our job." She says nothing. Years in court have taught her that some things don't get resolved in holding cells. They get resolved in federal filings. What the department hopes will blow over quietly becomes something else. Renee files a formal complaint. When Internal Affairs treats it like an annoyance, she files a civil rights lawsuit. The suit is devastating. It lays out, in precise legal language, everything that happened. Unreasonable seizure, unlawful detention, violation of her Fourth Amendment rights, and, crucially, racial discrimination. Because if she were white, in a bathrobe and slippers, standing on a porch with a key in her hand, does anyone really believe the officer would have ordered her to step off the property first and ask questions never? The city's attorneys try to minimize it. They say the officer was confused, that it was a split-second judgment call. The Bodycam tells a different story. In court, the jury watches it in slow motion. They see a black woman calmly explain that she lives there. They hear her correctly state the limits of his authority. They see him ignore the house number, ignore the mailbox, ignore common sense. They hear him mock her when she tells him she's a judge. They watch him put her in cuffs on her own porch. Legal experts testify about the home as a protected space, about how the law treats private property, especially when there is zero evidence of a crime. They point out that the entire justification for the encounter was a neighbor who didn't recognize the black woman who actually pays the mortgage next door. Civil rights experts talk about something else, the pattern of black people being treated as intruders in spaces they own, Airbnbs, apartment complexes, suburban cul-de-sacs, and now a sitting judge in her own driveway. Do you think this should have been handled with a quiet memo and a training video, or did it deserve exactly the courtroom spotlight it got? Let me know in the comments, because this is where theory and reality crash into each other. In the end, the jury doesn't just see a bad decision, they see a message. If this can happen to a judge who knows the law inside and out, what does it say to everyone else who doesn't have a robe, a title, or a legal team on speed dial? Their verdict is blunt. They side with Renee. The city is ordered to pay $5.1 million. The official statement calls it a significant judgment that underscores the need for continued training and reflection. Behind closed doors, city officials call it something else. Expensive. Daniels is suspended, then reassigned. Eventually, under public pressure, he's pushed out entirely. But none of that erases the moment his hand closed around her wrist on that porch. Money can pay damages. It can cover therapy, security upgrades, time away from the bench. It cannot rewind the tape in her head. It cannot erase the sting of hearing, as a black woman who climbed every rung of the legal system, a uniformed officer telling her to get off the property she fought so hard to buy. It cannot untangle the knot in her stomach every time she pulls into her driveway now and sees a patrol car at the end of the street. So here's the real question. This case leaves behind. What is the value of a right if it depends on whether the officer who shows up respects it? We like to say, no one is above the law. Cases like this quietly add another line. No one is beneath it either. Not the student walking home. Not the veteran with the dog, not the judge in slippers carrying cold takeout onto her own front porch. Until that's true in practice, and not just in courtrooms, verdicts like this won't just be payouts. They'll be warnings, signs that say, in language the city finally understands, ignore someone's humanity on their own property, and it might cost you millions.